Hey everybody. You know, normally I don't really come on camera with these kind of things and talk about them, but I thought it'd be interesting to talk about this for a little bit. If you go to Ken Penders' forum, kenpenders.com, to his message board, and you go to the Sonic, I think it's, let me look here, I don't know if you can see me or anything, hopefully you can. But if you go to the Sonic, Knuckles, and Sega section of his message board, there is a thing at the top, or near the top, called In Answer to Numerous Requests. Now basically what Ken is doing here is he's kind of explaining what would have been had he stayed on with the book. Now some things might surprise you in case you don't really know about this. But this is what Ken basically said. Now, line of succession would have gone off without a hitch. System shutdown, reconfiguration, and reboot would have gone off without a hitch. But then we get into the issues that he would have been on. Basically, the issues that Ian Flynn began his work on. And basically the stories that he had planned, and this is the honest truth, the stories he had planned starting in 160 all the way up to 200 are like this. King Sonic, that's right, King Sonic of Mobius years later. You might remember in Ian's original writing of Mobius years later, King Sonic just vanished and everything vanished with him. So basically, according to Ken Penders here, according to Ken Penders, his version to the sequel to Mobius years later, if you will, is that King Sonic, let me repeat that, King Sonic has returned to the scene of one of his greatest battles and probably the cause of his problems in the future. Because if you remember, in the original story of Mobius years later, the future was kind of getting unstable, and no one really knew what was going, what had caused it, or how they were going to be able to prevent it from destroying the planet. So anyway, he goes down. Basically, he goes back in time. No one in this time frame of his greatest battle and the possible cause of what's happening in the future, no one there could see or hear him. And that any attempt to take action, and I'm reading some of this from here, results in someone suspecting a supernatural cause. Now, according to Ian, when King Sonic does return to the future, he discovers a world change on top of having failed to change events in the past. So in other words, he returns to his world, but the world has changed. And it's because he failed to change the things in the past. So as a last resort, Rotor sends Nicole into the past after having created her. Now that basically right there with the, now this basically was supposed to span two issues, 160 and 161. The issues that Ian started on. And had Ken continued on with those issues, basically we would have been given confirmation that despite how people feel about it, the future that we saw in Your Face and in earlier issues, just a glimpse of it, and then what we saw in years later would have been a confirmation that that was indeed the actual future of the Freedom Fighters, despite how people feel. Now, Ian continues on with another story called Last Tango and Knothole. Now, according to Ian, we get a new couple introduced, if you will. I guess you could call it that. As Uncle Chuck, that's right, Sir Charles Hitchcock, Sonic's uncle, goes on a date, basically goes out on the town in Knothole with Rosie. That's right. Rosie is basically, I guess now Uncle Chuck's girlfriend, according to Ken Penders, or what's going to be his girlfriend. And then it's up to Sonic to play guardian angel and prevent Robotnik's stealth bots from spoiling the happy couple's evening. So basically Sonic has to, I guess, sneak around and make sure no one disturbs his uncle's or Rosie's date. Now, the next one's called, and that was for 162. The one going into 163 would have been called Girls' Night Out. Now, the reason this one's called Girls' Night Out is that some teasing, basically this is what Ken Penders wrote. He says that some teasing from Ash results in Mina and Amy Rose making their way, Mina and Amy Rose, get this, making their way into Robotnik's stronghold to prove they're just as capable on their own as any freedom fighter. R.E.-Sonic, you know what I mean. Now, when Sally hears this, here's about what Mina and Amy are up to, she and Sonic head out after them, only to discover Rouge and Nicolette the Weasel, Nack's sister, Nick the Weasel, on the scene, each looking to second, or I guess escape. I don't know what it is. It basically says each looking to absect with the rare gem that will power Robotnik's latest weapon. So I don't know if that means escape with the rarest gem or what, we don't know. But that's one issue, and that's 163. Now, 164 would have been known as the Robian this Hedgehog. 164 would have been the Robian this Hedgehog. Basically what it is that Sonic overhears that his father, Jules, resents the fact that he cannot enjoy a normal life with his wife. So Sonic, Jules' son, risks all to find a cure. And with the aid of his Uncle Chuck, Sonic makes his way into Robotnik's nanotech labs and retrieves what he hopes is the answer to the problem. Unfortunately, according to Ian, Jules is still a Robian at the end, but thanks to nanotechnology, he now looks more like his old self. So according to Ken Penders here, 164 would have had Jules remain Robian, basically robotic, but he would look. But thanks to the nanotechnology, he would have looked more like his old self again. Now, according to Ian, the next story in 165, and could have been 166 as well, because what he said is that it could have been one 16-page issue or two 11-page stories is spread over 2 issues. But basically he says in 165, in Last Man Standing, Antoine pops the question to Bunny. So instead of popping the question to her in 173, like Ian had him do, Ken would have had Antoine pop the question to Bunny in 165. Unfortunately, according to Ken Penders, she's not able to respond before the gang has to go off on a mission to shut down Robotnik's power plant before it melts down in the core. Now, while Sonic does all he can to ensure a safe ending for all, circumstances dictate a sacrifice on someone's part. And Snively ends up proving he has more moxie than anyone is given him credit for. In other words, Snively dies in 165, according to Ken Penders' storyline. Now, 166, called Fallout, or would have been called Fallout, basically says that Sonic is racked with grief and feeling responsibility for the death of Snively. And it drives everyone that much harder when preparing for the next mission. Now, as the assignment unfolds, everyone becomes uneasy as the possibility draws that Sonic could cross a line he never did before. For the freedom fighters, this moral quandary becomes even more difficult when it's discovered the enemy's latest plan could result in the extinction of every life form on Mobius. Now basically what it looks like is Ken Penders wanted to play on the grief and emotion that Sonic felt for the death of Snively. Excuse me for a second. And I'll be back with part 2.